I understand now I have the floor. I only want to make one comment about the statement that was made by my good friend from West Virginia, and that is that the states are looking at it now. And in some of these areas, pre-existing conditions, the senator is correct. There's a broad support for this. And so that's for that reason that various states are now looking at it. Madam President, I want to share something since I have the floor, and we've had an exciting day with the additional member that we have in John Kyle. I want to mention one thing about Senator Kyle. Senator Kyle and I, many years ago, we actually were elected to the House of Representatives on the same day. We were elected to the Senate on the same day. And I remember so well, many years ago, when I was first elected to the House, it happened that my father, and I lived in Iowa at that time, and John's father was a member of Congress. And so the first thing he said to me, when you get elected, go over and meet a guy named John Kyle. Never did I dream that we'd go through all this and we'd be meeting again for the third time in another election. So he'll be a great addition. And everyone knows that no one can fill the shoes of our good Senator John McCain. But certainly there's no one who comes closer than John Kyle, having served with Senator McCain for some 20 years. I had an experience I wanted to share this morning, or this afternoon now, something that happened in church on Sunday. On Sunday, I was at a church, and it's a little rural church in Oklahoma. It's called Church on the Lake. A guy named Mark Descartes is the pastor there. Now, this is not my church. In fact, my wife and I, our church is the First Presbyterian Church in Tulsa, and that's a church where she and I were married a number of years ago, where all of our kids were married, all of our kids were baptized. My wife was baptized there over 80 years ago, so no one's closer to that church than we are. But occasionally, I'll go to other churches, and nobody actually knew I was going to be at this church last Sunday. And I want to share an experience that I had because a lady came up to me that I didn't know. Her name was Lois, Keene, and she said, would you give this letter? This is the letter. Would you give this letter to President Trump? And, you know, I don't think there's a member of the Senate or the House that doesn't get this request quite often. It sounds kind of easy to do, but it's not easy to do. But after I read the letter, I decided this is something I really want to do. She said, would you give this letter to President Trump? And so I said, is it okay if I read it? And I read it. And it was a letter supporting him, recognizing, and this is someone from Afton, Oklahoma, who it's so obvious to her what the press has done unmercifully to this president. I've never seen anything like it. She'd never seen anything like it. And so she had something that she wanted to give to me defending the president. And I read it and I said, well, you know, I have to say that these are not the words I would use. If I were defending the president, I would say, because you have to get people's attention, and when you have an unfriendly media, you have to simplify it so everyone understands it. And so I say I normally talk about just three issues. Number one, the economy. I mean, our economy right now is at a time that we have not seen anything like in 40 years. Now, the two things, the indicators you look at are the economic growth. The economic growth during the last quarter was actually exceeded 4%, and it's been averaging over 3%. Now, during the Obama years, it was for 8 years, it averaged 1.5%, 1.5% growth, as opposed to at least doubling that, maybe 3 times that. Now, why is this important? It's important because for every 1% increase in economic activity, what that does is bring in new revenue equaling about $2.9 trillion over 10 years. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you when we're now going through and rebuilding the military and all these things and the infrastructure, these are things that we need to do. They're going to cost money. And so anyway, that indicator is there. Then also the indicator in terms of employment. Our unemployment right now has dipped actually below 4%. Well, 4%, economists always say 4% is full employment. And so we have that. And the economy just couldn't be better than it is. And yet, and it's undeniable, and yet nobody talks about it. The media doesn't talk about it. The second thing I would say, what everyone knows now, what happened during the 8 years. I don't criticize former President Obama. He's one who he's what I call a real honest liberal. He's not a closet liberal. He comes out and says it. He believes that we need to have a more of a socialist society. We lived through that. And someone with that belief is not going to be real strong in terms of building a military. So we've gone through this military thing for about 8 years, and now we are defending. We passed a defense bill, which we named after John McCain, and that defense bill is putting us back on the road for a strong national defense. People think, erroneously, that America has the best of everything, and they don't. You know, right now we got to the point where a lot of our systems weren't the system. Our triad system, for example, which is the modernization system, both China and Russia have one now that's better than ours. Our artillery system, you measure artillery, Madam President, by the range and by rapid fire. And we are outgunned and out by both Russia and China in those areas. We know what's happening in terms of right now. We're to the point now where we have actually confirmed 26 appellant judges just in the short term that this president has been in. So I would be talking about that, but that's not, that was not what she said. And so it is true, and her observation is true. It doesn't go unnoticed by people when you have the media who isn't really not treating President right. And by the way, I was a victim of this too. Back during the McCain discussion, after McCain's life was lost, I several times on the floor, I talked about the fact that way back in 1994, when I ran for the United States Senate, the only 3 senators would come out to Oklahoma to help me. One was John McCain. He came out twice. We flew all over my little airplane in the middle of the about 100 degrees, and he campaigned for me. So he's been a good friend. And yet, by responding to one of the major medias in a way that I made some comment about the fact that you have 2 individuals, Senator McCain and President Trump, who just don't have a good relationship. Well, everybody knows that. Well, they tried to turn that into something to be negative that they thought they wanted people to believe that I said. In fact, I was in St. Louis between flights. Gosh, it was about 10 o'clock at night. Shortly after that, and someone jumped all over me and was convinced that had said something negative. And that just, it just flat wasn't true. So anyway, I'd like to read the letter before I tell you that I'm going to try to pass this on to the president. And I read it. And as I read the letter, there's a group, as can happen after a sermon takes place, and then we're all sitting around talking. And every head nodded with approval of this letter that this lady gave me. And here it is right here. That's her handwriting there. The letter says, "Dear President Trump, I'm writing this letter to encourage you. All across America, God's people are praying for you. With all my heart, I know God put you in office for such a time as this. He has given America a window of time. At this time, there is a spiritual war going on for the soul of America, good versus evil. That is why there is so much opposition against you and the Christian people. You have so many, many people praying for you. Stand strong, Mr. President. I know you are a warrior, or God would not have placed you in office. You will continue to come against opposition because the enemy, Satan, will continue to fight you as he will God's people. The stakes are high. As God's warrior, continue to fight. We are fighting the battle with you on our knees. Many battles are won on our knees. Thank you for being our leader and our president. Our love is with you. Yours in Christ, Lois, Keene, Afton, Oklahoma." So I just would say to you, Mr. President, you are being butchered by the media. Everybody knows that. But keep in mind that America is full of Lois Keenes, and they love you. Okay? With that, I'll yield the floor.